Okay, so our next speaker is Anita Posch. She's a Bitcoin educator and author, a podcaster. Anita created the Bitcoin for Fairness project to educate in emerging countries, especially in Africa. For Anita, Bitcoin is a tool for freedom, human rights, and privacy. Amen. Let's welcome Anita Posch. Woo.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming here. Although Michael Saylor is speaking on the main stage, I hope I'm not going to disappoint you. I don't think so, to be honest. So thanks for coming to my talk, which is called Bitcoin and Human Rights, What 99% Are Getting Wrong. So my name is Anita Posch. I'm the founder of Bitcoin for Fairness, a non-profit initiative whose goal it is to bring Bitcoin knowledge to the people who need it the most. I'm the author of Learn Bitcoin, and if you're free after my talk, I'm doing a book signing session at 10:45 at the Consensus Network booth. And I'm also the founder of Crack the Orange, which is a Train the Trainer online program for aspiring Bitcoin educators and community builders from the Global South, where we give scholarships to these people who want to share Bitcoin knowledge on the ground in African countries. I've been since early 2020 to Zambia, Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, and to Zimbabwe, where I spent the most time. I spent over a year in Zimbabwe, and we helped or supported other organizations to do Bitcoin education and networking in Nigeria and Malawi. And of course, I've learned a lot of things there. What we did are talks. This is, for instance, in the capital of Zimbabwe, in Harare. I've been to Zambia a few times. This is in Lusaka. I was talking at the University of Lusaka there, and we also did a lightning workshop and other wallet workshops. And I also visited in 2022, as one of the first people, visited Bitcoin Ekasi in South Africa. You might have heard of that project. We brought hardware wallets, even a full node, a Raspberry Blitz, and we did some workshops with the guys who, on the ground, bring Bitcoin education to their people in the township where they live. I did a lot of media interviews here, for instance, that's with Trevor Nkube. He's a very famous journalist in Zimbabwe and has one of the biggest YouTube channels in Zimbabwe. And last but not least, what we're also doing is I'm doing workshops for human rights activists. Last year, we conducted one in Zambia, in Lusaka again, with 50 human rights activists from 26 African countries. And last week, I've been at the Oslo Freedom Forum organized by the Human Rights Foundation, where we also gave workshops to share the essential knowledge about Bitcoin and how it can help human rights activists at the Oslo Freedom Forum. So the title is What 99% Are Getting Wrong. Yeah, I mean, 7 years ago, I also knew absolutely nothing about Bitcoin, and I got many things wrong. But the most things people get wrong are, they say Bitcoin is not a medium of exchange. They also say Bitcoin is not an investment because it's so volatile. Bitcoin is a waste of electricity. That's basically what most Europeans, or let's call it Westerners, believe. Bitcoin has no rules, and therefore Bitcoin is only for criminals. I actually agree Bitcoin is not a medium of exchange only, because it's a ripcord. That's a term that was coined by Andreas Antonopoulos, one of the best Bitcoin teachers that we ever had or are having. And why? Because Bitcoin is revolutionary, it's immutable, it's public, it's collaborative, it's open, it's resistant to censorship, and it's the most decentralized cryptocurrency that we know of. Where I say that the property of openness is one of the most important. It means that anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of their status, their wealth, their gender, their nationality, can use Bitcoin, and you don't need an ID for it, which is great. So it's permissionless. It gives everyone a seat at the table or in this row. There is no hierarchy in Bitcoin. Bitcoin users are as important as Bitcoin miners or developers. And then we have the resistance to censorship. This is so important because Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency, besides Monero maybe, that is resistant to censorship, and that enables people to rise up, to stand up against their authoritarian leaders and protest their governments. Because without money, without access to money, you don't have freedom of speech or the freedom of association. That's why I say that Bitcoin is the embodiment of human rights. In 1948, the UN Convention, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was signed by the United Nations. And it has 30 articles. 11 of those I identified that they are related to Bitcoin, that Bitcoin can enforce them. And I will go through a couple of them. So first, there's the right to freedom and equality, and the freedom from discrimination. So everyone around the world should have the same rights and the same possibilities and the same freedoms. But if we look at the map of the freedom in the world, we see clearly that this isn't true. The violet-colored countries are basically not free. You're not free to speak your opinion or do what you want in these countries. And it's interesting that there is a correlation to the distribution of wealth. And of course, you can see the orange and dark red nations are those who are the poorest. What are the reasons for this? Of course, one of the reasons, especially for African countries, is colonialism and neo-colonialism by Western countries, and also, you gotta say, by African leaders who say, now it's our turn to eat. Now we are the ones extracting value from the people, sadly. And another reason is that in 1944, at the Conference of Bretton Woods, a new order for the world was set. And as you can see, it was set by the 44 allied nations who won the war, and they had good intentions. But this is a very homogeneous group. I have nothing against old white men, really I don't, but they can't speak for billions of people, and they don't know the problems the other people in the rest of the world have. And in their good intentions, they founded the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, was already founded after the First World War. And after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001 in New York, the US set even tighter regulations. And this led to the exclusion of 1.7 billion people who are still unbanked, and 58% of that are women. These regulations trickle down to all these nations because otherwise they are being excluded from the US-powered financial system. And it also leads to the fact that a lot of banks are very bureaucratic, they don't work. This is a picture from Zimbabwe. Every week, every month, people are lining up in front of the banks to receive their wages. And if they are lucky, there is some money in the ATM, maybe not. It's also rather ridiculous, I want to say, that the banking fees in South Africa are higher than the banking fees in Germany, although people in South Africa earn much less. Also, we have something like monetary colonialism. In 14 countries in Africa live 200 million people, and they still have a fixed exchange rate to the euro with their currencies, the West African franc and the Central African franc. And these countries have to deposit half of their foreign exchange reserves with the French treasury. That's not sovereignty and independence, that's still monetary colonialism. Let's take a look at the right to privacy and the presumption of innocence. To be honest, I didn't know that the right to privacy is in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And the general manager of the Bank of International Settlement recently said, we don't know who's using a $100 bill today, but with the central bank digital currency systems, the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and the regulations that will determine the use of this money. So they really want to know everything from us. So we're walking with open eyes, not everyone, but a lot of us, into a so-called panopticon. A panopticon was a building invented by the British in the times of the Industrial Revolution, which is highly efficient. So it's built in a circle so that 3 guards can control 288 prisoners all the time. So they walk around in circles, the windows or doors are open, and the prisoners never know when the guard is coming around. It's rather very, very creepy feeling, I must say, if I think about that situation. But this is where we actually are already living in. We're living in a digital panopticon, and it's getting worse. The European Committee approved prohibition of cash payments over 10,000 euros, prohibition of anonymous cash payments over 3,000 euros, and actually, it's already illegal to send 100 satoshis, which is like sub-cent in euro, to a custodial wallet like the wallet of Satoshi. Then there's the presumption of innocence. You're actually only guilty if a court has said, yes, has proven you wrong, you did something wrong. But a few weeks ago, the developer of the Tornado Cash software, which is a tool to enable us to have privacy in Bitcoin use and cryptocurrency use, he was convicted to more than 5 years in prison in the Netherlands. Because the justification was, he knew when he built the software that money from criminal activities will be entering the system that he's built. And that's why he's guilty. So it's basically like saying, oh, you're manufacturing a knife or guns. You know that people will kill other people with the guns, so that's why you go to prison. It's not happening. It's only happening with our digital privacy and money. Also, KYC, which is Know Your Customer verification, when you need to show your ID and where your residence address is basically the opposite of the presumption of innocence. All the time, when we want to use a bank account or we want to use on a regulated exchange cryptocurrency, we have to prove that we're not doing anything wrong upfront. And actually, KYC is the threat. That's the problem. Because these companies never ever, and also nation states, there are so many hacks of databases where sensitive data is going out into the internet. It happened to Ledger, the hardware wallet manufacturer. In December 2020, all their customer data leaked. So that means when you buy a hardware wallet, you give them your residential address, your name, your phone number, your email address. And so basically, all this data is out there in the internet now. And you might have some bad surprise if someone wants to visit you, because now people know that you earn or hold Bitcoin, and they know where you live. And these companies also don't learn, because the same thing happened 3 years later with Ledger again. And then people are telling me, but I have nothing to hide. It's true, you might have nothing to hide. The most of us don't have anything to hide. But the Zambian lesbian woman who walks on the street to protest for same rights, their bank account is being shut down. She's been sent to jail because she has nothing to hide, but if she had privacy, if she had money that she used that gives her privacy, they could not have shut down her bank account or their access to a financial system. So privacy in today's world is really luxury. You need to know how to do it so that you have privacy in Bitcoin. And there's a presumption of guilt. And then we have freedom of movement. I mean, with all the immigration laws, we don't have any freedom of movement anyhow anymore. But if you, for instance, need to flee your country because there's a war, you can take your Bitcoin with you. You only need your 12 or 24 seed words, and you can move across borders, and you have access to your money again. But you only have that if you use Bitcoin with self-custody. You don't have it when you have your Bitcoin on Bitpanda, Kraken, or Coinbase, or how they are all called. And these words also give you property of your Bitcoin. You are the sole owner of your Bitcoin. It's a human right, the right to own property. And all people in the world should have this right. All people, not all people have it, and mostly it's women who don't have it. It's still 75 countries in the world restrict women's access to inherit something or to own something. In Zimbabwe, for instance, the law says women are allowed to inherit and to own property. But still, on the countryside, in the rural areas, you have the tribal courts. It's still very patriarchal. So you had widows selling the land that they inherited from their late husbands, and they were punished by the tribal court. So basically, they are not allowed to use what they own. Freedom of speech is also a very important right. Speaking of Zimbabwe, we helped a person, a friend of mine, in the capital to set up a BTC Pay server to receive donations to pay for computers for the school. So the person is a headmaster of a school, and they were able to buy these computers. A few weeks later, the computers were stolen. They reported it to the police, only that the police came back a few days after and arrested the headmaster, beaten her, threatened her, and always asked her, where is that money from? Also, Bitcoin supports freedom of association. Because if you can't donate to a cause that you think is important, you also can't stand up for your rights. So in Zimbabwe, for instance, it's very common that opposition members are abducted, beaten to death, or they even are not allowed to wear a yellow shirt because the color yellow was banned in the last election because it was the color of the opposition. Another example how Bitcoin helps. In Nigeria in 2020, there were the End SARS demonstrations, where people were uprising against police brutality. And the Feminist Coalition of Nigeria collected donations via their bank account. A few days later, the central bank shut down their bank account, and the young women reminded themselves that there is something called Bitcoin. They set up a BTC Pay server and were able to receive donations again and support the protests. Another very important right is the right to security. The right to security for the dignity and the free development of the personality of any person. I think that social security also means that you can rely upon a money that holds its value, or at least that you can save money. We don't have that anymore. And the example of Zimbabwe will show you how the fiat system can be taken to the extreme to steal from their own people, from their own country. First, you can use US dollars or the national currency to pay for goods. So basically, very often you have two tills, one for US dollar, one for Zimbabwe dollar. Then, there are no coins. If you pay in US dollars, there's only banknotes. Meaning, if you want change, you always get sweets or things like small things. or a voucher maybe. In every shop, you have an exchange rate board, because every day the exchange rate to the US dollar changes because the value of the national currency goes down. So the first question in the morning is always, what's the rate today? I was there in Harare in September 2022. We were driving with the car to a supermarket, and my friend says, hey, look at this guy. What does he have in his hands? And I took a look, and it's a bag full of money, of Zimbabwean dollar. And this guy is definitely not rich. He just went to the supermarket. So this is a typical Zimbabwean bread. It hasn't only gotten smaller, it also has gotten more expensive in recent years. I had this example also last year, but there were some developments. So in 2019, the Zimbabwe dollar was introduced, and it had an exchange rate to the US dollar from 1 to 1. So this bread cost 1 US dollar and 1 Zimbabwe dollar in 2019. In 2020, when I came the first time to Zimbabwe, it was 1 to 28, 1 to 105, 1 to 200, and remember that was where I shot that photo. In 2023, when I come back again, it was 1 to 4,000. In January this year, when I left Zimbabwe, the bread cost 12,000 Zimbabwe dollars. And then, in April, it shot to 35,000 Zimbabwe dollars. And what did the government do? They invented a new currency for the 6th time since 1980. It's called Zimbabwe Gold, ZiG. And the reason why there is this high inflation is excessive money printing and looting. The Zimbabweans know it themselves. This is from a Zimbabwean website. The reason is corruption. The governing elites are stealing 1.5 billion worth of gold every year. So you might wonder, they say the ZiG is backed by gold. Not even the government believes that, because the government doesn't allow people to use the new currency to pay for passport issuance and things like that. And then, on the 5th of April, they said there will be a new currency from one day to the other. And it went into effect on the 5th of April. But no one had the new banknotes, because they only came around at the end of April. And at the same time, you might say, okay, then use your online banking or mobile money. Everything was breaking down because no system was prepared for the change. But still, there are headlines like this, that with the ZiG, they finally want to turn their back on inflation. But then the next day, you see that Zimbabwe is planning rules to enforce the use of the ZiG. I mean, if your currency has value, you don't need to force people to use it. There's also financial repression. Every other year, they arrest money traders. You need money traders. Everyone has a private, trusted money trader there to exchange the Zimbabwe dollar to the US dollar, but that's also a way you can exchange it to Bitcoin. And this guy here, Neville Mutsvanga, we met him a year ago in Zambia. We spoke about possibilities to bring more Bitcoin adoption and more Bitcoin liquidity into Zimbabwe. And when we flew back to Zimbabwe, we met with a trusted friend, and he told us, yeah, but you know who that is? And we were like, no. It's the son of two ZANU-PF ministers, basically from the party that is ruling since 1980. And we were like, okay, thank you. And we never met him again. And of course, you already have inflation in the ZiG as well. So at the beginning, it was 1 to 13.56. Nobody knows why it was that exchange rate. But only a month later, it was already 1 to 20. So you don't have any social security with inflation. And then we have the right to a free and fair world. And I want to argue here. We always hear when the IMF makes a so-called structural adjustment. Zimbabwe wins a loan for 1.3 billion US dollar. Hurrah, hurrah, congratulations. But for that, you need to do this, and this. And let's remind ourselves of the goals of international development help. Richard Nixon said in 1968, the main purpose of American aid is not to help other nations, but to help ourselves. Do you think that anything has changed since then? I don't. And that's the reason why many African countries can never get out of their debt, because they are in a circle of death, I always want to say, in a rigged system. That's maybe the reason why the share of Bitcoin usage in sub-Saharan Africa is the highest in the world. That's maybe the reason why in Nigeria the use of Bitcoin is exploding. And of course, the government there doesn't want that to happen, because then they would lose their power, because they steal from the people through the Naira. So they say the peer-to-peer traders are the reason why the Naira has lost value. And that's why they banned the peer-to-peer usage of crypto again. And they even take further steps. They invited 2 Binance managers to come to the country to speak about possibilities, how to resolve that situation. What they did was they detained the managers. One of them is still in Nigeria. They took his passport away. On the other hand, Africa empowers Bitcoin. As we said before, many people here believe Bitcoin is a waste of electricity. I don't think so, for all what you've heard also, how Bitcoin can help. There's a mini pump station, water station in Bondo, Malawi. We connected them with gridless. Now there is a small Bitcoin mining going on there, and they also built the electricity grid so that 2,000 people have the first time electricity. The people in Bitcoin Ekasi in South Africa go to show that also poor people can use Bitcoin. In South Africa, you can spend your Bitcoin in over 2,000 stores. These are supermarkets like Interspar or something you know here. You can spend your BTC by paying for electricity. There's a wallet called Machankura, with which you can use Bitcoin without internet. You use it on your regular phone, like SMS. That's also an interesting number. It's 20 is the average age of Africans. And this is the average age of Europeans. What do you think? Where will we have more innovation, more people using Bitcoin? It's the youth, of course. And also, because I showed you what's happening to people who use Bitcoin in these countries, because they can uprise, they are not talking about it that much. And that's why I say Bitcoin is a silent revolution. And it might sound illogical, but by using Bitcoin, also here, you support human rights and human rights fighters and help to make the world more fair, because it gives access to anyone. So we have been doing a lot of educational work in African countries, but I also realized it's great to be on the ground to build trust, but also you need constant education. And to scale education and adoption, we need people on the ground who can share their knowledge with their friends, with their peers, with their family on the ground. And that's why we've built Crack the Orange, which is a train-to-trainer scholarship program for aspiring Bitcoin educators and community builders in the Global South who can apply for a scholarship. That means they are 1 year in the program and they can do it for free. And in the end, they even can pass the exam, if they learned enough, to become a certified Bitcoin professional, which gives them, on black and white, the confirmation that they really know a lot about Bitcoin, and then they can look for jobs abroad, remote jobs in the Bitcoin space. So everything of the work I do is basically based on donations. On grants. I don't take sponsorships to stay neutral. And so please donate if you have the possibility to anita.link/donate. And if you want to stay updated on my work and what we are doing, please subscribe to our free newsletter at anita.link/weekly. Thank you very much.